Well, the GOP plans on keeping up the pressure on President Obama now that they have a majority in the House. The president has invited GOP leaders to the White House on November the 18th to hopefully get things off on the right foot. But can the president and an emboldened Republican Party work together? And if so, how? Let's ask former White House Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush, Andy Card, for some perspective. He joins us live from Washington this morning. Welcome to In Business. It's great to have you on the program, sir. We've been talking about this sort of changing makeup and complexion of the Republican Party. Ironically, the Bush-era financial stimulus plan, the bailout for the financial sector, became a rallying point during this election, and as an anti-bailout, anti-spending, anti-stimulus platform for the Republican Party. Is this party the same one of George Bush's?
No, it's a different Republican Party right now. The movement that brought new members to Congress was a movement of frustration. It was probably a redundant frustration. I think people were frustrated with the direction that President Obama has taken the country, very, very frustrated. I think they were also a little bit frustrated with Congress, and that includes Republicans and Democrats, and some of it may be lingering frustration with President Bush, even though the first significant debate will be over a very important part of any stimulus to our economy, which is the tax cuts that were put in place by President Bush are scheduled to go away in January, and Republicans will say, keep the tax cuts in place. So I think that's going to be a dominant part of the debate early on.
Yeah, it sure seems to be. Well, now the GOP has to turn that frustration into something, right? And in a way that uses the new authority in a way that stabilizes and strengthens a party and gets them ready for 2012. How do you do that without overexerting the reach?
Well, you may be missing the point. I think this election was as much a rejection of what President Obama has been doing as it was an embrace of what Republicans can and should do.
Right.
And so the first obligation is for President Obama to take steps to work with Congress and the new Republican leadership in Congress. And he's got to make some pretty dramatic strides to get to the point where Congress will take him seriously and believe that he is going to be part of a solution where they work together rather than come in and be a bully. He was a bit of a bully during his first 2 years, and that arrogance is what created a wave of protest against him, and the policies certainly were not consistent with America's expectations. So I think the initial burden is for President Obama to demonstrate that he got the call on Election Day, and he's going to change, and he's going to bring an effort to try to work with Congress to the table, rather than say, come to my table, I want to see how you're going to work with me. I think it's actually up to President Obama to lay the first cards on the table and say how he's going to be different in dealing with the Republicans who will now be helping him to govern this country.
Well, the point of the question was what the Republican Party can do in the next 2 years to get themselves ready for 2012. So putting the onus on the Republican Party as well to make the most of this position of strength they're in.
Well, first of all, the Republican Party won one House of Congress, the House of Congress. They didn't win the Senate. And even if they had won the Senate, they wouldn't have really controlled the Senate. They might have controlled the calendar, but it would have been very difficult to get 60 votes to make something happen. So I do think the House will be very aggressive in trying to bring discipline to the government. They'll be tough on spending. I think they'll be strong on saying government has got to get out of the way of business, and small business in particular, so that we can have some job generation. But I don't think that you should say that the House is going to be the solution to all problems. I think they may offer a road toward a solution and work toward it. And it's very important that Speaker Boehner, when he becomes Speaker, make sure that he is able to govern and lead at the same time. And that's a very difficult challenge when you have a Republican caucus that's kind of energetic and ready to be strident.
Right. No, the point is that it's a foothold. That's a fair context here. But talk to me about the decision points, right? Your former president and boss there, President Bush, coming out with his autobiography. Some early releases of text have gotten a lot of attention, clearly here. On the financial front, the president said he didn't think the financial crisis was the result of a lack of regulation. He said it was the result of bad judgment. With the hindsight that you have now, do you agree with that?
Well, I'm going to let the book stand for itself, and let's wait for the book to come out. It's a very significant book, and President Bush did a wonderful job writing it. He reflected on the tough decisions he had to make. Let's wait and comment about the book after the American people have a chance to buy it, and they don't have a chance to buy it yet. It doesn't come out until next week.
Right. Well, they have the chance to hear plenty of sound bites from it because they've already been running. So on that question,
they may be taken out of context. So let's let the book get out there so that people can comment on it. President Bush had to make some very, very tough decisions as president. I didn't agree with every decision he made. I respected how he made every decision. And let's read the book, and then we'll be able to comment about it. Okay.
Well, I don't want to ask about the book now, but ask you your opinion for our financial audience here. With the hindsight you have now, looking back at the administration, what would you have done differently or advised differently on the economic and financial front?
Well, there was an economic crisis that showed up, and there weren't a lot of people anticipating it, and that was in September of 2008. And when that crisis hit, it was important that the president provide a bridge to competent decision-making, and I think President Bush did provide that bridge, but it was the next president and Congress that really built the road that followed after you crossed that bridge. And I think you're going to find the president will be talking about that in his book.
All right. Are you going to be writing a book yourself?
Someday. I'll write it more for my grandchildren than I will for public consumption, but I was very blessed to have had phenomenal experiences, and I hope to be able to share them with people who cared about what I was doing. But I was kind of like a great Forrest Gump. I was there for an awful lot of fabulous things in history.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people would like to hear about that perspective. Thank you very much, Mr. Carr, for joining us today. We have to leave it there.